Hey everyone, welcome back to Why in the Valley. The world of education is constantly changing, with new digital platforms proving a 4-year degree isn't the only pathway to better paying jobs. Perhaps no one has more insight into online education than today's guest, Gabe Delporto, CEO of Udacity. Udacity is a digital education platform that has educated over 14 million users globally and is transforming workforces of entire countries at scale. With that, let's jump in. Welcome to Why in the Valley, Gabe. Very excited to have you here.
Well, it's really great to be here. I'm excited for today's conversation and looking forward to jumping right in.
Absolutely, man. What a day to be interviewing you when Udemy goes IPO this morning, right? It's like edtech is on fire right now. So definitely a very good news, just for the industry overall, I guess. So I'll just start, I was seeing your Twitter feed and you were having a lot of fun in Dubai with a falcon on your arm. I'm just wondering, what were you doing there, and what do we need to do to make sure Udacity offers the nanodegree and falconry?
Yeah, it was a little terrifying having a falcon on your arm, but he behaved pretty well. It turns out we have several significant customers across the Middle East and North Africa, countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt. These are all areas where these countries are going through really massive change, huge societal change, and really digitization is core to everything they want to accomplish. But they've historically had very little training and education in science, technology, cloud, cybersecurity, analytics, like all these areas that underpin the future of technology. They really have very little endemic training of their workforces. And so we've been working with them, for the last 4 or 5 years to really mass reskill and upskill their citizens at scale and help them digitally transform their workforce.
That's phenomenal. So I guess you've started traveling as usual or more than before, I'm assuming.
It was my first work trip in 18 months and a little nerve-wracking, right? Yeah. So being it's 24 hours door to door to get to somewhere like Saudi Arabia. And so you're in a lot of airports, a lot of airplanes. And so, I've got my N95 mask on and I've, been backstage and all that stuff. So did my best to be careful, but it's been a week since I got back and I don't have COVID. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. I would love to know more about your background, especially during your childhood. I think you grew up in West Virginia and you got a nuclear engineering degree. I would love to know what actually influenced you a lot to have that level of interest in science growing up.
So as a kid, I was literally running around the mountains of West Virginia barefoot. I wasn't even sure I wanted to go to college, let alone get a degree in engineering. In fact, I didn't even know there was something called engineering at that point. At about 16 years old, I wound up getting a job at a local pizza joint, and I actually moved out. I rented a room and a trailer from a coworker, and started working and continuing to go to high school. At 6 a.m. in the morning, I would wake up and catch a public bus to school. I'd go to school all day, then I'd catch another public bus up to the Mountaineer Mall and work at this pizza joint. And about 11 p.m., I would bum a ride from somebody to get back to my trailer. Then I'd study till 2 a.m. and start over. And it was really the best thing that ever happened to me. It made me realize how important it is to really get an education so I don't have to spend the rest of my life in a low skill minimum wage job. And it really formed my view of the world. My grades shot up. I set my sights for college. It was really a life-changing pivot for me.
Mm. And how did you end up in nuclear engineering?
So when I got to college, I knew that I loved math. I knew that I loved science. But I'm also a really practical person. So the idea of studying pure math and maybe like getting a job as an actuary seemed really abstract to me. Studying pure physics, wasn't quite sure what I would do, with that to have an impact on the world. So, I went around and looked at the various degree programs and majors and found out there was something called engineering. So I went and talked to the engineering schools, mechanical, electrical, and chemical, and nuclear. And what I loved about the nuclear engineering department was the challenge of it, like the fact you get to study nuclear physics and quantum mechanics. You also get to study a lot of things like thermodynamics, thermal hydraulics, control systems. It was a super interesting, challenging, technically fascinating career path. And so I kind of leaned into that and really enjoyed studying nuclear engineering. Now, what do you do with a nuclear engineering degree? Typically people do one of three things. You either go out and design or run nuclear power plants. You go into nuclear medicine, or you work for the Department of Defense. And I wasn't at all interested in the latter, but I really love the idea of nuclear power as a clean source of energy, and decided to really go into that career.
And when I looked through your LinkedIn, did a lot of research on your background, and there's a very interesting section which talks about your role as a traveler. Trekked across 15 countries on 4 continents, including Mexico, Costa Rica, Ecuador. I would love to know, like, what triggered that, and how was that experience?
So, such an interesting story. I was still pretty early in my career, but I had been working extremely hard at this startup I was working for, and the previous company I'd worked for, was in consulting. So I'd been just like burning the candle at both ends, and I was just kind of burned out. I'm like, what's the point of all this? What's the point of life? And so the startup was, they were in the process of getting sold, and so I knew I would be my role would be eliminated. So I'm like, I'm going to go travel around the world and see how other people live their lives and find the meaning of life. I was literally like looking for the meaning of life. About 3 weeks before I left, I met this girl, fell in love almost instantly. Invited her to travel around the world with me for a year, looking for the meaning of life. She would later become my wife.
Nice.
And we went to all these countries, and I remember being in rural Vietnam and looking out and seeing people like with pretty subsistence careers, working in rice paddies and things like that, but getting a lot of joy in their life. And I realized that joy didn't come from money or advancement or something like that. That their joy really came from family, and they had really tight-knit family groups. And up until that point, I'd never really thought about, do I want to have kids? In fact, being an engineer, I'd run the net present value calculations when having children, and it always came up negative to me. I'm like, I don't understand why people have kids. This is a bad investment. But it was kind of that moment where I realized there's a lot of intangible value in that net present value calculation in terms of having a family. And I decided, one of the big pieces that was missing in my personal meaning of life was family. So really had a tremendous time learning new cultures, learning about myself, and kind of set me up with a lot more perspective as I re-entered the workforce, coming back to the United States in 2003.
And when I see that when you were at E-Trade and Zeco, which was, I think, acquired by Ally, and you even founded your company, Atomic Financial, then you had a phenomenal stint at LendingTree. I would love to know more about, where did you start, at LendingTree, right? And one of the things I discuss about with a lot of our people at YML and anyone who comes to me for career advice, like, what do you advise Ashish? How can I grow my career? And my answer is consistent. If you have joined the company, just say they were like 50 people. And then when you left, let's say there were 500 people. And if you can tell a story, how you have played a role in that, that is the definition of career growth, right? And I love, like, you've had so many different roles, CMO, CFO at LendingTree, and would love to know, like, where you started and where you ended.
Yeah, and LendingTree was such an extraordinary experience for me. I joined to lead marketing in 2011, and I knew the company had challenges, and I didn't realize quite how many challenges they had, right? So 5 weeks into my tenure there, Doug Lebda, the CEO, called me into his office and said, we have $5 million in the bank and we lost $15 million in Q1, and we need to turn this thing around. And that was like a, oh my God moment. and we basically had 3 months to turn the company cash flow positive, or there might not be any more LendingTree. And so that was my indoctrination into the company. So as we kind of went through that process of just like getting our cost structure right, restructuring the company, really, bringing down our payables and all this really tactical stuff, I had to go to Doug and say, I'm about to hire the most expensive people you've ever hired in your life, and it's going to work, and you have to trust me. Because we didn't have the talent. It was it's a marketplace. LendingTree is a marketplace, and it's a marketing driven marketplace. And we didn't have the talent in the marketing organization to win. And I have to give total credit to Doug. He believed in me. We did it. I brought on some, really quickly, some phenomenal talent, and we were able to, through cost reduction, but also like marketing efficiency improvements, within 3 months, had gone cash flow positive in the business and started to grow the business again, right? It was a very, very short, intense period of time, but, I see no rules in your background. And, a really key piece of this is it's all about the talent. And so we were able to bring some great talent on, turn the company around, start to get on a growth path. And we started to grow again, and we started to perform well, and we started to beat our competition. And then around 2013, Doug asked me to take over the president of mortgage role, which was effectively all of our business, and except for a couple smaller divisions. And so I stepped into that role and had never played that role before. And I took a step back and said, well, if I'm going to be, president, like what should our strategy be? And we did a really quick strategy project back from my strategy consulting days, and realized that like we were a monoline business, more or less, and it was tied to the direction of interest rates, which is something we didn't control. And we had a competitive advantage, which was our brand, which everybody knew. And that advantage extended into other lending categories. So like one of the key pieces of the strategy change was to stand up a bunch of new lending categories, which I kind of rolled into my organization. And those categories exploded. Like the product market fit was off the charts. And we started to now like not just grow, but grow really, really fast and really profitably. And we started to focus in more on, cross-sell and repeat business. And so that took off. And then in about 2015, Doug called me up and said, hey, do you want to be the CFO? And I'm like, what are you talking about? No experience as a CFO. And he's like, look, I get that, but I need someone who can drive.
Was LendingTree public then?
At a public company.
Okay.
Right. So, basically I have to give Doug total credit. Like, he had the guts to, put someone who'd never been a CFO into the CFO role in a public company. But what the value I was able to create there was not in accounting, right? So I had this woman, Carla Shoemate, who was amazing chief accounting officer. Like she had the accounting piece down. But the value added there was like, how do we allocate capital to the right place? How do we raise more capital and then use that for inorganic growth? And we went out and bought some companies that were phenomenally successful. How do we tell the story to the street in a way that we're positioned as a tech company, not a financial services company? And that worked out really well. It was very uncomfortable for me for the first 6 months because I really didn't know what it took to be a CFO. But pretty quickly was able to figure it out and execute those things. The net result is like I got to be, the CMO, president, CFO over a 7-year period, and took the stock from a $5 stock the day I joined to a $351 stock the day I left, and the number 3 return on the NASDAQ.
Wow.
And it was every single day was a dead sprint. Every single day I was learning and challenging and trying new things. And it was the biggest professional growth in my entire career.
And what do you think was the reason behind this astronomical growth?
At each stage, it was different things. In the early stage, it was just like getting the right talent in place. We just didn't have the talent to win. And there were some good people there, but not enough and not in the right skill sets. And so we brought in some phenomenal talent, and that fundamentally changed the trajectory of just the growth. And then it was strategy. So once you're executing well, then you can actually take a little bit wider aperture and say, like, what is our current strategy, but what strategy does it take to win? And, how do we refocus the company on those growth areas? And in our case, it was diversification and repeat business. And then in the final piece of it, it was completely different. It was realizing that there are situations where 1 + 1 = 5 in the inorganic growth of the merger and acquisition space, where you can acquire a company, you bring a skill set to that company that they don't have, you plug it in and it explodes, or vice versa, right? And so we were able to really leverage that inorganic growth. So I think at each stage, you got to think about what is my situation and what is the biggest lever I have right now? And then how do I deploy, my skills to create step change improvement at that stage?
And what was kind of the reason when you had to step back, from Lending Tree and you transitioned into Udacity? Did you take a break between, or was it like pretty immediate?
Yeah. Look, I mean, at that point, like, I pretty much achieved everything I wanted to achieve in my professional career. And I started thinking, like, what do I want to do for the world? Like, how can I do something that will have societal level impact? Like, I've worked with a lot of great companies that have great products, and I started to really think inwardly. So I talked to Doug. I'm like, Doug, I think I'm done here. I think I've done everything I want to do. He asked me to join the board, and I remain on the board. So I still remain, affiliated with the company, but I took some time off to really think deeply about what mattered to me. And I started spending more time thinking about my roots in West Virginia. And I started really thinking, boy, that economy has changed a lot since I was a kid. And when I was young, coal was big and natural resources was big, basic industries, and people can make really good livings in West Virginia, and really good wages working in these industries. Well, those industries automated, and there's almost no one working in coal anymore in West Virginia. And the state basically did nothing to retrain or reskill the population. As a result, like, an enormous number of people just left the state because there's no jobs there. The people who are left have, not great economic outcomes. A guy I grew up with who was a 4.0 student, was probably thought of as a really great job there, but he's making $30,000 a year or something. And that's a good outcome. So I started to really think about that. What could you do to reboot an economy? And I just kept coming back to the jobs of the past are gone. We need to be training people in the jobs of the future. There are so many talented, smart, hardworking people in that state. And they're sitting here working in low-wage service industry. You need to get people skilled in things like software development, analytics, digital marketing, cloud, whatever. Like, there's unlimited demand for these roles. You can do them remotely, and you just got to get people the right skills. So I kind of came to this conclusion. And about this time, I met Sebastian Thrun, who's the founder of Udacity. And they were looking for a CEO. And he basically said, yeah, you're right, but this isn't just a West Virginia problem. This is a global problem. And what's going to happen over the next 10 years and this is according to a McKinsey study, is something like 1 billion people are going to be disrupted by technology, right? One in every 4 or 5 workers in the world. Nearly 100 million jobs will be eliminated. Over 100 million jobs will be created. And the people being eliminated and the jobs being created, there's no path between A and B. And so really, it was a very, very easy decision for me to make to join Udacity, because really Udacity had built this amazing product that solves this problem. How do you get people who are trained in the skills of the past and get them skilled up and employed in the skills of the future? And do that in a global scale, help my home state of West Virginia, but also help people around the world. So that's really why I came to Udacity, is to have societal level impact and really help the world transition and pivot into a digital first economy.
If for anyone who doesn't know what Udacity is, how do you define Udacity?
Udacity is the fastest, most effective way to get employable job skills in the careers of the future. Things like data analytics, software development, machine learning, cybersecurity, self-driving cars, cloud computing, digital marketing, product management. These are all the areas that, that are growing the fastest among employers, and where there's literally no supply among employees. And you can literally, in 3 to 5 months, 10 to 15 hours a week on your own time, be fully qualified to take one of those jobs. And really, that's what Udacity does. Now, on a higher level, like, Udacity transforms lives, businesses, and nations through radical talent transformation and digital technologies. What that means is we are partnering with nations to train tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and sometimes millions of people on digital skills, transforming their economies. And we're able to literally measure our impact on their GDP growth. That's the level of impact we have. We work with enterprises who cannot go through a $1 billion cloud migration because they don't have the talent. We're not learning as a benefit. We assess their existing talent, we onboard them, drive them through rigorous training programs, and get them in seats deploying those skills in a cloud transformation, in a machine learning AI transformation. And so, and can literally measure the impact on their ROI, because we track it all the way through to deployed skills and projects implemented. And so we're really a talent transformation platform. And I think, like, Udemy and Coursera and LinkedIn Learning, like, everybody should have one of those platforms. They're super broad. They cover 100% of your employee base, everything from soft skills to literally the art of happiness, but they only take you so far, right? They take you from 0 to 50%. And what Udacity does is really focuses in on the hardest to fill areas, those digital transformation skills, and we take you from 0 to 100%. Like, people coming out of our programs are productive the second they sit in the seat in that new job, and nobody else can do that.
And when you talk about, like, data science, AI, all these digital learning courses, the learning curve on these things can be pretty steep, right? So who are, like, the typical audience who are enrolling for such things? Like, do they have any kind of digital background? Who are they?
It totally depends. I'm going to give you 2 stories, right? On the low skill level, like, let me give you the story of this guy, Tony Boswell. Tony Boswell was a truck driver. He owned his own truck. He had driven over 1 million miles. He spent 300 days a year on the road, never saw his family. His truck broke down, didn't have enough money to fix it, had to sell it, and was nearly bankrupt. He got a Udacity scholarship in partnership. We did a program with Google, and got a Udacity scholarship for our Android, I think it was our Android app developer program, and got him trained up, and he was able to get a job in software development. And now, like, the guy's, can spend time with his family. He's earning a really great wage. He's earning employee of the month. Like, you can take someone from effectively no digital skills to, a entry-level job in one of these careers of the future in a pretty straightforward path. Now, let me give you another use case, which is also pretty common. We work with Shell, and Shell, came to us and said, hey, like we've got, we work in 70 different countries, and we need to get data science deployed in those 70 different countries. But we don't have the skill sets there, but we have an asset, which is mechanical, geological, civil engineers, people who understand math, they just don't understand data science. And so we helped co-create a program called Citizen Data Science with them, and we're able to skill those engineers, field engineers, in data science, and they started deploying data science across the globe out in the field. And the great thing there is they know the business. If you hire someone out of college with a PhD in data science, they know the math and they don't have a clue on how to deploy it in a useful way in a company, in the oil and gas industry. You take an engineer who really understands the industry and all the problems and the nuances there, and you teach them these data science skills, all of a sudden like, oh my God, I got 4 things I'm going to deploy this on, and I'm going to generate enormous value. And they were able to build a machine learning model that would take live streaming data from every rig across the globe, be able to predict when there would be mechanical failure, get replacement parts out into the field before there was failure, and avoid outages. Each outage cost them like $2 million. Right? So now all of a sudden this company has like millions of dollars of savings. So if you want to be a machine learning engineer, like you can get there, but it's going to be multiple what we call nanodegrees. Right? More likely what you're going to do is you're going to start with someone with some pretty good math skills and engineering skills and get them up to the machine learning area. And you're going to start with someone with just basic foundational math skills and get them up to like a data analyst level, right? So for broad-based people who don't have these digital skills, we can get you into an entry level. And then over time, ladder that up. Once you get some experience at the entry level, we'll give you the next program, get you the next level, get you the next level. So you can go as far and as fast as your brain can handle. And for other people who already have a pretty good foundation, you can get them to the advanced level pretty quickly.
And who are the people who are creating the courses?
So really important here. There's different ways to skin this cat. One is you create a true marketplace where anybody, kind of like a YouTube or Udemy or something like that, anybody can upload content, they put it on, and then, they're a marketplace that match supply and demand. And there's some really good courses on Udemy, and then there's some others that aren't as good. And there's no consistent, what you would call pedagogy or methodology, learning methodology. What Udacity did is say, well, what we want to do is start with an employable job resume and work backwards. So when someone comes out of our program, they should have actually done the job. And so to graduate from our programs, like if you want to be an Android app developer, to graduate from our program, you have to literally build an Android app, upload it to the Play Store, have it accepted by Google, and line by line code reviews by Udacity mentors. Now you don't start by building an Android app, but that gives you a sense of like the outcome of our programs. To create the content and the theoretical foundation around that, we don't go to academia because typically they're 10 years behind and super theoretical. We actually go out into industry and co-create the content with industry leaders. So we created our React content with Facebook. Facebook invented React. We created content with Google on Android, right? So we're partnering with industry leaders to make sure it's state of the art, it's relevant to industry. When you come out of the programs, you've actually built something that someone would employ you for, and you can sit down in your seat day one and get going. So we control the content production. It's our methodology, our pedagogy, our approach. We partner with industry to create that. And everything coming out of our program is super consistent quality and consistent outcomes.
So you're working directly with the engineers, in Google, and they're, okay, got it. So you'll be glad to know that like YML has worked very closely with Google on TensorFlow courses, like how to apply TensorFlow, application of TensorFlow. It's such a powerful technology. And, now more and more people are aware of it, but like, how do you apply that to solve real world problems is, what we worked on. And today, like, what do you see as like the biggest challenge Udacity faces?
The biggest challenge is probably, challenge is opportunity. The world is changing so quickly. And what we need to do as a company is to get our story out there. Because if you think about the various markets, around the world, like the US and Europe and elsewhere, like in the US, we have a real culture of fire then hire. So you fire someone over here and then you go hire the skill set you need over there. There isn't a culture of let's retrain these people and get them into these new roles. And what you're seeing is around the world, and especially in the US, but globally, there is an all-out war for digital talent. I had a chief information security officer tell me the other day, we are literally in an all-out war and we're losing. This was at a major bank. And so the option of hiring this talent is no longer on the table. We have to manufacture it. I was talking with another bank, another major bank. They had posted 160 data scientist positions, and 6 months later had hired 8. Right? The talent doesn't exist. Yeah. So, but there isn't really a culture in the United States and an awareness in the United States that you can manufacture that talent internally. Right? And so I think our biggest challenge is changing that cultural mindset to bringing awareness to the fact that the biggest resource you have is sitting right in your company. And you can get them productive in a very short period of time in the areas that you can't hire anymore. And so it's really just a sea change of culture and perspective. And that's really what we're leaning into today.
And when you look at like the whole industry today, right, it is becoming a lot more mature today with so many other options. When you have Lambda, you have Udacity, how do you compete, across the board? So
I think about, like, if you think about the MOOCs, the Coursera's, the Udemy's, and all those guys, right? Every company should have that offering. Because as I say, it's super broad. It covers a lot of stuff. You're never going to, that's what I call learning as a benefit. People are going to learn something. They're become fluent in some idea. It's great. Everybody should do that. You're not going to transform your organization at scale doing that, right? You typically it's very low uptake, very low graduation rates, pretty low engagement. What you need to do is have really focused, programmatic, like talent transformation strategies. And that's what Udacity does. We work with the executives from the beginning of your talent transformation strategy. We identify your employees, we onboard them, we run them through in really rigorous programs, we graduate them at 70 or 80%, and they get like deployed in these huge talent gaps in your organization, and you achieve ROI. That's what we do. We do that with enterprises, we do that with nations, and we do that at scale. Boot camps are amazing, except for they're really expensive, $15,000, $20,000, sometimes $30,000. And they're not scalable, right? Because by and large, they're in person. They're starting to do a little bit online, but it's really, really, synchronous and inefficient, right? So boot camps are a great solution for a very small number of people, but they can't do it at scale. And universities haven't changed in 100 years. There's a few forward-thinking universities like Western Governors University and a couple others, but for the most part, they are delivering the same service as they delivered in 1988 and charging 3 times as much adjusted for inflation. They've done nothing but increase their prices and change nothing really about what they do. And it costs now $100,000 to $200,000 for a 4-year degree. And those skills are obsolete 4 years later. It's just not a solution. I'm the product of the university system. You are too. It was great, but I'm doing nothing related to my degree. And they are not set up to skill people at cost and at scale, and they've failed to innovate. So I think if you were to design a company from the ground up that would be able to attack this massive societal dislocation at scale and at cost, you would naturally come to what we do at Udacity. This is the logical conclusion.
So someone, who's, let's say, who's in marketing, or someone who's not in tech industry, but I've heard so much about AI, machine learning, data science, every day they're in the news, right? And what do you suggest, they can do to skill up?
So first of all, take a structured program. I will give you one piece of inspiration, right? And it's really, it goes back to how Udacity was formed. So Sebastian, was a professor at Stanford teaching a graduate level AI course. And back in 2011, decided to put it online. Stanford was really not happy about this, but he did it anyway. He got 160,000 enrollees in a graduate level AI course. He got 23,000 students to actually complete and pass this graduate level AI course. And the number one student at Stanford scored number 413 in the class.
Wow.
And literally like this guy on dialysis and a soccer mom in like Pakistan were beating the best of the best Stanford graduate students in AI.
Wow.
Talent is everywhere. You can do this. Like, absolutely, you can do this. Get on a structured program and go for it.
Well, that, brings me to the diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is, I know it is a very big thing for you. Like at YML, I remember the first 3-4 years, out of like 50 people, we had like 2 women. And as a male founder, like early on, I never realized how big a challenge and problem that is to fix, right? And like today, now we are close to 500, and we have put a lot of effort to make sure we have almost equal representation. So 44% of YML is women today. And I know that like you recently partnered with 110 to provide 3,500 scholarship to Black talent. Can you talk a little bit about that and like, how Udacity looks at diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So it's really at the core of everything we do. And I'm going to give you a couple of stats that just make me angry, right? Women make up a majority of the workforce in the United States, but less than 25% of the employees in technology fields, right? So they're underrepresented by 50%. People who represent as Black represent only 3% of technology workers. 3%. This is terrible. What 110 is doing is spectacular. They're partnering with very large employers around the United States to fund training in technical areas, and they're targeting Black students who don't have a 4-year degree to get them trained in technology fields and employed. And their goal is 1 million trained Black students employed in 10 years. This is a pretty big and ambitious goal for any one organization. So they are like affecting societal change. We were, I believe, the first partner they picked to implement those scholarships, right? And so we are now going out into market to select students and get them moving on training, and we are super proud to be part of that. We run our own minority-focused scholarships. So we did our pledge to equality, where we gave scholarships to a whole bunch of Black students, and have followed them through to graduation. We've actually hired a bunch of them ourselves. We have run a major conference on women in STEM in the United States. We're running another one in November in Europe, and are giving away a substantial amount of scholarships associated with that. So we're doing everything we can to lean into our personal funding of scholarships, our personal ability to bring awareness to the issues. And one of the things that we can do to amplify that is we're starting to partner with large companies to fund and drive change through their corporate social responsibility funding. So every company at this point, more or less, has a budget for for attacking one of these major societal issues, lack of women in representation in technology, lack of Black representation in technology, and other things. And almost none of those dollars have an ROI. Almost none of what they're doing today has any impact. And so we're starting to partner with those organizations to really drive directly measurable impact in terms of getting people skilled, getting them graduated, and tracking the impact on their careers and their incomes in a way that they can actually take it back to their CEO and say, we've actually driven real change here.
Yeah. And I truly believe that, if you educate somebody, right, today, you are not just improving their lives, you're improving the generations will come after them. And so it's definitely like, this is kind of a pivotal moment. And, the world is going through that change over the past, especially the past 1 year or 2 years.
Well, so do you know what the single most predictive factor on whether you're going to go to college is? Is whether your parents went to college. Right? So whatever your parents do, the kids follow. If your parents get a job in technology, good chance your kids are going to get a job in technology or some other kind of really attractive career. And so everything we do, I totally agree. Everything we do on this generation affects generations to come. Yeah. And it's an additive and multiplicative effect.
Yeah. And so you joined Udacity in 2019, and the pandemic happened early 2020. So I would love to know, how did you navigate the pandemic journey, and how did the business pivot, during that time? Like at YML, I say this all the time, at least once every day: follow the change, not the plan. Right?
Yeah.
The pandemic was the definition of that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, we were in early March when everything, fell apart and everybody started working from home. We didn't know what was going to happen. Like, we were kind of terrified, to be honest with you. We didn't know how it was going to affect our business, how it was going to affect our employees, how we would operate, effectively. How effectively could we operate remotely? We'd always been pseudo, on premises, but also a lot of remote work. And so we were pretty comfortable with that model, but we had never gone fully remote. We didn't know if we could really be effective there. We didn't know if it was going to help or hurt our business. So I think, like everybody, we were, a little freaked out. And the way we reacted to that was, we didn't really have a good structure for focusing the organization on a couple of key initiatives and really driving through the execution. And so literally within 7 days, we had learned about, implemented, and adopted OKRs to drive our business forward. And we said, for us to be successful in this new environment, here's like the 4 things we need to do. And we got everybody on board and lined against that. And it worked. We had, at the time, the best quarter in the company's history. The shift that COVID has caused, COVID has been terrible, but also it's going to have enormous positive societal impact, right? The ability for people to, most organizations never thought in a million years you could actually have productive remote workers. And we've proven that wrong, right? You can have very productive remote workforces. So now all of a sudden, I don't have to live in Silicon Valley to get a high-paying Silicon Valley job. I can live in my home state of West Virginia and get a Silicon Valley job. Fundamentally, the access to a lot of these high-skill, high-paying jobs is becoming democratized across geographies in a way that maybe you were in Flint, Michigan, or whatever before, and you had no chance of getting one of these jobs. Maybe you can. So the world changed really overnight. To navigate that, we put together like an OKR structured process. But really what that crystallized for us was the importance of, we started off as a consumer business, and that really was in our DNA of the company when I joined in 2019. But we had this enterprise business and this government business that was starting to boil up, and but there was a lot of skepticism in the company, and it became clear to us at that point when COVID hit, we got to follow where the market is taking us. And consumer, while it got a little lift from COVID, that's not where we can have the biggest societal level impact. The biggest societal level impact is going to come working with enterprises and nations to transform workforces at scale. And we've gone all in on our institutional business. And so we just did that pivot, and it's ugly and it's messy operationally and everything else, but like at some point you gotta go where you can win. And we thought, in the early days we were going to win in consumer. It turns out we win in institutional, because that's where we can have the biggest level of impact, and that's where the greatest pain is.
Yeah. And I'm assuming today, like, are you remote first? Or
yes.
What's okay?
We're remote first, and we get teams together periodically as needed, because I think what we've learned is you can do 90% of your job remote, and like you don't need to be commuting 2 hours a day. At least once a month for me and my team, we get together and with a whiteboard and work through like a full day of like hard issues. And then we go back remote for the rest of the month. And so I think there's going to be some combination of, you can never, I don't want to say never, but it's hard to be fully remote. And but it is really impactful to have super deliberate focused periods of time when you're together, and then let people work the rest of the time remotely. And I think that's, for us, something that's working really well.
Yeah. And so in this world, right, like how do you, when people are remote and most of the time they're alone and they're zooming in and out, it's like, how do you build strong teams? Like, especially when you go through tough moments, right? Because then it's not just about transactional tasks, right? It's a lot about like the emotional connection, because people are not sure about the outcome, and and people are under a lot of stress. So how do you kind of build strong teams?
So when you get together, because it was a year before we got together again in person, and many of the people on my direct reports like had never met each other. And so when we got together, we said, let's be super deliberate, right? It's not just like get together and hope for the best because you're in the same room. It was, how do we identify beforehand some really hard things we have to solve together? And then that's piece one. Piece two, how do we put a deliberate structure in place around team building, right? And then number three, how do we make sure we spend some time socializing? So when we got back together, we had some strategy to work through, but we also had, hired a coach who had, had us take some, psychological tests and whatever. And we kind of went through and had some sessions working together where we learned about each other and our styles and, why we behave the way we behave. And that was really good for us to develop empathy and understanding for each other, and also understand how we can take everybody's strengths and weaknesses and use them better. And then we spent some time like going sea kayaking together, for example, and having dinner and drinks together, to just personally get to know each other. So in a remote first world, when you do get together, it's not just you're getting together to be in an office, you're getting together to do those three things together and be really deliberate about it. Yeah.
So Gabe, we are coming to the last section of the podcast, and it's called the sprint. And I'm going to give you two options. There are no right or wrong answer. You just have to pick one, and and you can explain if you want. And this one is an interesting one, because I'm still confused between the two: nuclear fusion or nuclear fission. I remember, like, I took a course in engineering. I did electrical engineering, and I always used to get confused between the two.
So it's pretty simple. Fission is a lot easier than fusion. And fission is breaking apart an atom. So you take a really big, heavy atom and you break it up, and the resulting two atoms are more stable than the combined atom. And by nature of that, on the nuclear level, what that means is a lot of energy is released. That's fission. That's like uranium, plutonium. That's what powers nuclear reactors. Super established science, super effective, clean, safe, lots of new technologies to have just incredibly, safe processes. Fusion is taking two light atoms and smashing them together, and the resulting combined atom is actually more stable than the individuals. And that then releases energy, right? And in the middle between heavy and light is iron, which is the most stable element in the universe. And so you're taking like maybe two hydrogen atoms and smashing them together to make a helium atom, for example. And that gives off a lot of energy. And the result is like you're left with helium, and it's not, it's not really radioactive, and it's you don't have to deal with all the fission byproducts. So everybody's really excited about fusion for this reason. The problem is fusion is 1,000 times more technically difficult than fission. And the joke when I was at MIT was fusion is this was 30 years ago. Turns out true. Fusion is 20 years away and always will be. And, so like no one was really sure at MIT we would ever get to like a feasible fusion reaction. And they've at MIT just had some major advancements in magnet technology, which is required to really hold the plasma in place. So there's some belief that we could actually get to a self-sustaining fusion reaction in the, at least a pilot of this in the next couple of years. There's still, even if they can do that, there's a lot of engineering challenges, but once you can kind of get to that self-sustaining reaction, that is the biggest hurdle. And then the rest is engineering problems.
I'll be looking forward to the nuclear class from Gabe on Udacity. Bezos or Musk?
Bezos. Well, I don't know. It's a hard choice, isn't it? I mean, both of those guys have had,
of course.
Yeah, both of those guys have had like transformational societal level impact. But I think I look at what Amazon is creating and like the empowering culture they've created, the ability to really have that change on so many different categories. I think I'd go with Bezos.
Experimentation or research?
Experimentation, hands down.
People or process?
The what?
People or process?
People. People.
All right, last one. Data science or AI?
Well, I mean, it's a really convoluted term, but I think AI and machine learning and specifically, that's what's changing the world right now. And the application, and I think there needs to be continued advancement in just the kind of the algorithmic approaches, but the application of machine learning has totally been democratized to the point where you don't need to be a PhD statistician, which was true when I was early in my career, but the tools have become so much easier and so much more democratized that they can be applied in so many different contexts by so many much broader population. It's really changing the world, and it will continue to change the world in our lifetimes.
Silicon Valley is a mindset, not a zip code.